The Eurogamer Expo 2013 UK took place last week and I was able to attend for the first time ever, with the intentions of seeing all the new console hardware, but also all the next generation of gaming that has been teased for the last year. I've highlighted in this video with this handy annotation background that you can see now, so you can see all the hardware and games that I saw at the convention, so you can choose which you want to see and what you don't. Or you can experience the 2 days I experienced while at the convention. Sit back, relax and enjoy. First off, when I got to the convention centre, I went straight to the Xbox One section so I could try the new controller. The first game I queued up for was Ryse, Son of Rome. Initially announced as a Connect title under the codename of Kingdoms, this title was revised as a launch title for the Xbox One at this year's 2013 E3 conference. The E3 demo looked very pretty, but was criticised for very generic QuickTime events every few seconds in combat, which made the gameplay look very uninteresting. The creators seem to have taken this to heart, going off from what I've played at Eurogamer. The game controls now are your generic hack and slash style of combat, where you have a heavy and light attack, parrying, blocking, and a smidgen of magic thrown into the mix. The demo I've played was a co-op arena mode, where I had to face off waves of enemies in an arena. Control wise it works well, and the combat and violence you perform will make the likes of Game of Thrones seem tame. As a launch title, Ryse will be a great way to show players what the new Xbox One is capable of, but the gameplay is nothing to shout about either, very generic. I look forward to see what the developers do with the single player aspect of the game, and hopefully it will redeem this game. I now want to quickly talk about the controller. This was the first time I got to try the Xbox One controller. It felt a lot lighter than the standard 360 one. The major difference is the shoulder and back triggers on the controller. These stick out a lot more than your 360 controller, and it didn't feel quite right when I first got my hands on it. I didn't like it, and unfortunately I didn't have a good chance to get used to it because the demo for Ryse was so very short. I did get to try the controller again day 2 of Eurogamer, but for now I was kinda disappointed. Next up, I went to check out the Oculus Rift. This still in pre-release stage of development, this virtual reality headset has impressed a lot of developers and gamers alike by providing a new way to play games. Using positioning technology, this headset allows the player to turn their head to change the point of view of the game, which is displayed on the inside of the headset. This will allow the gamer to become immersed in the game world like never before. The game I played with the headset was a plane fighting game called War Thunder, where I was sat in a cockpit but controlled it with the 360 controller, and I was able to look out the window while still flying the plane. This may sound like nothing allowing the player to do this, but I urge every gamer to try the Oculus Rift when you have a chance, because it's so hard to describe. The most interesting aspect of the Oculus Rift is the possibilities it holds for games in the future, such as using the new Connect from Xbox One, which can identify individual fingers on the hand. What happens when a developer uses this Connect technology so the player can actually interact with the world itself. There is even a running machine in development, so you can actually move the character by moving on this treadmill. The possibilities for virtual reality is getting better by the day. This isn't a simple virtual void from Nintendo. Speaking of Nintendo, I headed over to their booth to try out one of their new exclusive titles coming to the Wii U, Bayonetta 2. The original game, which came out originally on the 360 and the PS3, surprised gamers with its insane combat mechanics and having one of the most silly and over-the-top stories in gaming that we've seen for a long time. The first game did really well, and the second was halfway through development when the title was abandoned by Sega. Thankfully, Nintendo helped back Platinum Games up so they could complete the development of this second game. Bayonetta 2 steps up the insanity level from the first game and has an incredible 60 frames per second in 1080p on the Wii U. The demo sees you flying on a fighter jet, because why not? It escalates from there with a giant angelic creature trying to take you down and chasing you onto a runaway train, and then you climb on top of a giant skyscraper to take down an escaped demonic creature. Controls are very similar to the original game, but with a couple of new additions. You can now cause execution attacks without your magic charge meter being full, but instead you charge this meter up to cause Bayonetta to go into an enrage mode, which lets Bayonetta summon powerful demonic weapons from out of nowhere. The game holds a lot of promise, and I should also mention there is a co-op mode, but this demo didn't have that. If I'm going off Platinum's last game, The Wonderful 101, I'm going to predict it's going to be local only, but I so hope they get online play for this. Next up, I went scouting for my game of the show, Dark Souls 2, which I couldn't find since the map was incorrect. Ugh. So after bumbling around the show floor, I decided to try Assassin's Creed 4 on the PlayStation 4, which gave me a big chance to try out the new controller. As someone who's only played Assassin's Creed 3, and that being the whole first 2 hours, I could tell the difference in graphics, and it held up really well on the PS4 at a good 60 frames per second. The world was a lot more open than the world in Assassin's Creed 3 from what I can tell, by having an open sea to explore because you're a deadly pirate. Yarg! The demo starts you off on a ship and gives you free reign of where to go. I just went around the open sea blowing up enemy ships and stealing their booty, while someone next to me went to a local port to experience the classic Assassin's Creed gameplay, while someone else jumped into the sea to go treasure hunting, and then got swiftly eaten by a shark. Freedom seems to be a big part of this game, and it'll be interesting to see where they will go with the story after how the game ended in Assassin's Creed 3. As I was saying, this was my first chance to try the PS4, so I got to try out the new controller. Improvements include the controller not feeling like a cheap piece of plastic, and having a good bit of weight behind it now. The thumbsticks now have a dip in the middle like the Xbox 360 controller, so it's more comfortable to hold down the sticks for longer periods of time, and they won't slide off like they did previously. The trigger buttons feel more responsive from the PS3 controller, which never felt quite right and didn't feel like it worked half the time. After I finished the demo, I decided to have a look at the convention centre from the second floor to get a better idea where certain games were. I spotted the game I was looking for, Dark Souls 2, and I headed straight to that booth. The demo that was on display for Dark Souls was the one from the Tokyo Game Show, which had a new playable class, the Templar Knight, which joins the like of the Soldier, the Sorcerer, and the Duelist. The demo tasks you with reaching the Mirror Knight that has been terrorising trade shows for the last year and to kill him. Talking to people showcasing the game, around 14 people had defeated the knight out of that day, from around 400 people who had actually attempted it. I was not one of those lucky few and only got the boss down to 1/4 of his maximum health, and that was my best attempt. People, including myself, worried that after an article appeared in Edge magazine saying that they wanted to make the game more accessible to players. But you can put those worries aside because Dark Souls 2 is a lot harder, and they have done some interesting gameplay changes, so you can't exploit the system as easily anymore. The AI is a lot smarter and less exploitable to backstabs and parries. You can't just bum rush to bosses now, since the fog gates that block them now require you to hold down a button to actually go through it, instead of just pressing one button and automatically skipping all the enemies chasing you. I was really impressed how well the game performed on the PS3 as well, because the last game was notorious for bad frame rate problems and buggy textures. This game looked beautiful with its lighting moving the area, keeping a good 30 frames per second, and characters moving in a more realistic fashion. I will not be getting it on the PS3 at launch, unfortunately. I am going to be getting it on the PC, because I want to get the most out of this game. The day was coming to a close, and so I only had a couple more hours to try out a few more games. So I decided to try out The Elder Scrolls Online. After being criticised by gamers for having a very similar art style to World of Warcraft, this 5-year project took a beating from fans and critics alike, and the development team seems to have taken this to heart and has changed a lot about the game since it was first shown. You may as well call this Skyrim the MMO, because it has ripped out a lot of the art style, user interfaces and sounds and models as well from that game. You'll have your map compass on the top of the map, which will let you see where things are. You will also have a health and stamina and magic bar at the bottom of the screen. You won't have any hotkey buttons unless you are in combat, so the game will play like Skyrim. You can even swing weapons in first person or third person mode as well, giving players that Skyrim feel of combat as well. However, character creation is a lot more restricted this time round. There are 3 factions in the game, which will compose of 9 of the Elder Scrolls races. Then you will choose a character class. Instead of being able to level up your character over a long period of time, you will choose a specific class at the beginning of the game. Another change is the game will not scale to your level as well like Skyrim and Oblivion did. You will explore areas that have a certain level cap, so that's kinda disappointing, but understandable because this is MMO. But what I got to see from this demo was very promising, and I look forward to see how well this turns out. Hopefully this isn't going to be another Star Wars. To end the day, I decided to quickly head back to the Nintendo booth to try out any games I missed out which didn't have a queue. First off, I tried the Super Mario 3D World, which is coming to the Wii U later this year. Using the same art style as the 3DS title, this game now includes up to 4-player co-op, like the recent new Super Mario Bros. Lands on the Wii and Wii U. Anyone who's played those titles will know how chaotic it is, and now you have a 3D element added to the game. The platforming and controls were very tight if you were using the analog stick, but if you were having to explore a 3D plane with a D-pad on the Wiimotes, you were at a kind of disadvantage. Fortunately, the difficulty isn't that hard, and if you do die, you will pop into a bubble which can then be popped by another player, so you can carry on from where you left off. Nintendo just put a recent Nintendo Direct today with a very cool trailer for the game, and I look forward to seeing how this game plays out. But will this be a system seller for Nintendo? I highly doubt that. But Nintendo has surprised us in the past, so we will wait and see. I also got to try a couple of indie titles out on 3DS, but nothing spectacular. And so the last game of the show I actually got to check out was this interesting point and click adventure game coming to Wii U called Tengami. This game uses the touchscreen on the Wii U pad to help guide your character through a pop-up book with a Japanese art style. You'll be moving the environment so your character can progress and help to solve puzzles as well. It has this sinister feel to it, especially when you got wolves stalking you in the background. I am really looking forward to see this come out on the Wii U, and it will also be coming out for the PC and tablets as well. Music was a part of the game as well, but I couldn't really hear it in the convention centre. But the developer told me it was an important aspect to the game and is also helpful for some of the puzzles as well. That concluded my first day at Eurogamer, so I quickly headed back to the hostel to write this up and also get a nap because day 2 was the day of AAA games. The second day of Eurogamer started with a plan to see the 2 biggest games of the show, Battlefield 4 and Titanfall. These next generation games are going to show off what these new consoles can do. First off, I got to try out the alpha build of Battlefield 4 on one of their new multiplayer modes called Obliteration. This mode tasked the 2 teams to blow up key locations on the map, but with only one bomb spawning at a time between both teams. The gameplay was a very interesting tug of war, carrying that bomb into enemy territories so you can blow up their locations. I hope the bomb locations will be randomized between games so players won't camp out the other team's bomb locations. I should also mention the game looked gorgeous on the Xbox One and ran at a good 60 frames per second with no slowdown at all. There was a comical moment when I got killed by another player and it showed him running around, his midsection body stretched up like Stretch Armstrong. It's kind of amusing. But hey, this is an alpha build. For myself, who is a PC gamer, I already experienced this type of graphical fidelity in my gaming, but for anyone who hasn't got a high-spec PC, these new consoles are going to blow people away. All in all, this game is looking very promising and may finally defeat the likes of Call of Duty for top multiplayer shooter. We will wait and see. Before heading to the 2-hour queue for Titanfall, I decided to try out Dying Light that was on the PC. This is the spiritual sequel to Dead Island and you can tell from the gameplay alone. Now focusing on a more real cast of characters in a world which is being destroyed by a zombie virus. You'll be helping other survivors and finding loot in the environment with a very Borderlands Dead Island quest structure. Characters seem to be more likeable, giving you a bigger investment in the story and world as well. Graphically, this demo looked impressive from the way the trees swayed in the distance and the zombies were frightening. The game also has a bigger focus on parkour elements as well, since you'll be climbing on top of buildings, cars, vehicles to get around the environments to avoid the zombies. But that's just during the daytime. At night, the game turns to I Am Legends, where you have some very scary zombies that can climb buildings chasing after you, so you need to hide and sneak around. I can't wait to play this on PC next year. I should now mention, in the Battlefield 4 demo and also the Dying Light demo, I got to try the Xbox One controller again. I really like it now. The triggers felt a lot better. I think the problem was I'm so used to the Xbox 360 controller after 6 years, I have muscle memories of how those triggers should feel, but these new ones work really well. I also should talk about a feature it includes, where the triggers actually have a force feedback element to them, where if you're pulling down the trigger on a gun, you'll actually feel the vibration in the triggers pushing against you. It's a nice element, but unfortunately neither of the demos had this working. But again, this is very alpha build, so I'll have to wait and see how that works out in the end. Next up, Titanfall. This game comes from the creators of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare franchise. The gameplay reminds me of a lot of what Brink was trying to do back in the day, with a parkour element, but this time including mechs, and the parkour done correctly. The game consists of mainly multiplayer for now, with 2 teams trying to achieve certain objectives depending on the map. However, in the demo it was mainly team deathmatch, with the illusion of one team waiting to evac someone from the area and the other team trying to stop the evac. The gameplay is fast and very much curious. You're either an agile soldier on the ground able to parkour around the environment by wall jumping and having a double jump as well. The game allows you on certain maps to wall run and jump from one side of the map to the other without touching the ground once. Then every so often you can call down a walking mech unit with various abilities and weapons to help support your team in the mission. Depending on how many players, mechs and NPCs you destroyed will decide who wins the map. At the end there is an epilogue where the losing team will try to evac the area, while the other team will try and stop them. You will get bonus experience if you escape, or if you stop the escaping team get away. It's a nice little element to add at the end of a match. The game is really balanced as well. Even if you're a soldier, you can take down the mechs because you all come with anti-mech weapons, and you can also get around the mechs quite easily by jumping on top of them or hiding on top of buildings. But the mechs are very powerful as well at taking out soldiers who are very unaware of their presence. This is going to be a great exclusive title for the Xbox One and the PC next year, and I can see this franchise taking over for Call of Duty from now on. Next up, I didn't fancy queuing up for another hour to 2 hours to try a game out, so I decided to start checking out the smaller games of the show. First up was Final Fantasy XIII's Lightning's Return, because there was no one playing that game. I was very curious to see how this game was going to come out, because the last 2 Final Fantasy XIII's were a giant mess and I did not like them at all. Now, as the title implies, Lightning Returns has you controlling the character from the first game, but it's a very solo adventure with no teammates helping you. This changes how the combat works a lot, and is now more reminiscent of Final Fantasy X2, which allows you to change classes on the fly. Each class comes with an energy bar that depletes every time you use 4 abilities connected to that class. Once that class energy runs out, you can swap to a different class and the previous class energy will recharge over time. It's a very interesting gameplay system, and you don't feel like the game is taking full control from you this time. However, I encountered a problem when I came across the first boss. The first boss in the game was weak to the lightning element. If you used the lightning ability enough, you could stagger him, reducing the enemy's defences. However, if your class runs out of energy and you can't cast any more lightning abilities, you need to change to a different class and wait for the original class to recharge. That was not very fun. Hopefully this problem is solved later on when there are more classes and more abilities available to lightning. The story of Final Fantasy XIII Lightning's Return is as nonsense as ever. However, game will consist of a weird Majora's Mask time element system where you only have 13 days to beat it. And there is also an interesting Assassin's Creed type gameplay where you'll be parkouring around the environment. This game is coming out at the start of next year, and I'm going to have to keep an eye on this title because it seems quite interesting and has a very promising combat. I decided to quickly head back to the Nintendo booth because I remember the queues there weren't that long, unfortunately, and I got to try out the new Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U. The game is very similar to previous Mario Karts, but brings over some mechanics from the 3DS title which introduced gliders and underwater sections. Now the game includes gravity that dramatically changes the level design, and with multiple routes you can take. The game also carries over the control schemes of the Wii game, which allows for analog controls or motion controls for both the Wiimotes and the Wii U gamepad. I much preferred using the analog stick, but I know a lot of kids prefer the motion controls, so that option is there for players. But that's about it for Mario Kart 8, not much else to say. Nintendo is relying on this and Super Mario 3D World to help sell systems, and I think they'll be disappointed. People aren't excited for these two titles from what I can see, other than Nintendo fanboys who probably already have a Wii U. What this console needs is a killer title. Something like the Super Smash Bros. Series, a new Zelda game, or even, for the first time ever, a Pokemon 3D World game, because that would sell the console. I ended my day by queuing up for the Sony booth so I could check out all its different indie games and also a couple of AAA games they've got in development as well. The first game I got to observe was Knack, and when I say observe, I got to see two grown adults and a kid struggle to beat this very childlike Spyro Mario game. It was very interesting to see the difficulty was quite hard. It wasn't because the controls were hard, it was because the game was actually punishing if you weren't paying attention, and Knack will die in 3 to 4 hits from the enemy. Very surprising since this game is more aimed at kids. When I got to play the game, since I had observed other people playing it, I blasted through it though. So yeah, I think the game is going to offer a challenge for first time players. The game looks very pretty as well with the individual bits of Knack flying around. But there were some frame rate issues in some of the battles, but hopefully this is a pre-release demo issue and not happening in the full game. After that I got to try Resogun, a 2D shooter in the veins of Super Stardust. This twin stick shooter was a lot of fun to play and very chaotic as well. This is a launch indie title for the PS4 and I think it will be well worth it if the price is right as well. Let's hope they don't overprice it. The last game I got to try and is worth mentioning is the Warframe game that is currently a beta in the PC and will be coming to the PS4 later this year. This third person action game sees you take control of a ninja-like cyborg who uses guns and powerful melee attacks to take out the corrupt empire. The gameplay I got to try was a wave-based survival mode where you had to protect a key location. The combat was fast and very explosive and reminded me of the likes of Devil May Cry. I did notice a lot of issues again with game rates dropping and a very shaky camera not focusing correctly, but hopefully this is because it's in beta still and these issues will be sorted out later on the PlayStation 4 and PC. After having my fill of the Sony booth and only 15 minutes to spare, I had to check out one last game. Hotline Miami 2, Wrong Number. This game is as brutal as ever and now tells two stories at the same time. The first story is actually a film being recorded based on the events of the first game, and the second story is following some kids who are mimicking the behaviour of the first game's character. Gameplay wise, it is very similar to the first game with new enemies and new weapons to take them out with. I also noticed the swaying of the screen seems to be less jarring this time round, which is a blessing in disguise for most people who got seasick from it. Music was as fantastic as ever and I will have to buy its soundtrack when it comes out. I look forward to see how these two stories are going to intertwine when the game gets released next year. After trying the demo for Hotline Miami 2, the second day of Eurogamer ended and I had to go home. There was so much more I wanted to play and next year I'm definitely going to buy a 4-day pass so I can experience it all this time without rushing around. Thanks for watching the video guys. If you've enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments below, and if you've got any questions to ask, go ahead ask them. Also, if you do fancy it, please subscribe to my channel. I'm really hoping to get to my 100th subscriber soon, and I can't wait for the little prize I've got to give away when it gets to 100. Thanks guys and girls, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.